Hi everybody, just in case there's someone here who doesn't already know me. So my name is Topi Rasku. I work at VTT, Technical Research Center of Finland. I've been involved with the Mopo project and the Spine project before that, mostly in SpineOpt development, also some spine interface development for those of you who might know what that means. But SpineOpt developer is maybe the easier to understand part. And as Tars mentioned, I'll be giving a quick introduction about the sort of planned SpineOpt input data structural changes that we are currently kind of discussing in the Mopo project. So let's see, does it actually? No, it does not change my slides. Whoops. So yeah, just before we get started properly, a brief outline so you can kind of prepare for what's ahead. So first of all, I will give a brief overview of what the current input data structure in SpineOpt looks like. After that, I will be highlighting the sort of issues with that current structure, which is why we're implementing these changes to hopefully address those issues. And then we get to the sort of meat of the presentation, maybe, which is the summary of the main changes. And then at the end, I kind of have a couple of slides about some more tentative plans we have about making some changes to connection as well. What this means will be more obvious later, as well as a sort of tentative timeline we're working with. And at the end, if there's any questions or discussion you want to have, then that's great. But without further ado, so hopefully you can see this well enough. I realize the font is a little bit small, but this is more or less what the current input data structure in SpineOpt looks like. And before you get too scared, if you're already familiar with SpineOpt, the most of it will remain the same with these changes, but there are a couple of key tweaks. And there's a lot on this figure. I've just put everything from basically the SpineOpt input database structure, that is the input data structure that you would see if you open the SpineOpt input data template in Spine Toolbox. I've organized it kind of for clarity here. So in the middle, I have the sort of core entity classes, the sort of basic building blocks that you use to build your models in SpineOpt. Around, I've kind of put these, I've organized all the other entity classes, which are the relationships you define to add more properties onto these core classes. And out of these core classes, I've highlighted the arguably most important ones, namely connections, nodes, and units here, because these are the kinds of very basic building blocks you use to build your energy system model. Connections for connecting, well, maybe I should have started with node, because nodes are the basic building block where you impose your energy demands. You define the geography, the topology of your model, mainly using nodes. The connections are the energy transfer links, whatever kind of things. Oh, can you actually see my, whoops, I was using a red, I wasn't using a laser pointer before. But yeah, connections are the entities you use to create links between nodes for transferring energy primarily. So power grid, gas grid, some sort of fancier commodity transfer networks if you want to model them, but those two are maybe the most important parts. And then units, which are the energy conversion processes. So taking energy from one node, converting it into another form, putting it on another node, converting fuels to electricity, or vice versa, if you're using an electrolysis plant or modeling an electrolysis plant. So these are the sort of very core building blocks. Everything more or less revolves around these guys. Then you have the model object, which is you're required to have, mostly contains settings about the model itself, how the time works, how the structures work, or the stochastic structures work, what outputs you want, etc. Then there are some relationships about stage functionality, but these are for fancier multi-stage modeling applications. So this is not for basic use. This is if you want to do something fancier. And frankly, I don't know how that stuff really works. Haven't had a need to use it myself, and I wasn't involved in implementing them. And then there are a couple of relationship classes about the stochastic structures, how to define them. But again, all of these are connected to units. For example, you create your units and then you define where they take their input from, where they put their input to, how their temporal resolutions work, how their stochastics work, etc. So more or less everything revolves around these three pieces, and the rest just adds more information on top. Now, the issue with this current structure that we have is that it kind of contains unnecessary duplication of some entity classes and some parameters. And this is a kind of a result of a design change that was made very early in the Spine project, where the sort of direction of energy flows, whether they are unit flows or connection flows, is kind of embedded into the entity class. It's not included as a separate dimension in the entity class. So instead of having unit direction node, we have unit from node, unit to node. Well, where is it? There's unit to node. And what this causes is two kind of issues. First of all, it kind of clutters the database because we need to have these two entity classes for the separate directions. We have unit from node investment group, we have unit to node investment group. But maybe the more annoying part is this unit node entity class, which is used to define properties of two flows relative to each other. So unit efficiencies, for instance. And this is a really problematic entity class because it has two directions in it. Whether you want to define a ratio between two inputs to a unit, whether between an input and an output, between two outputs of a unit, or a unit or output to input, kind of the input output but flipped, which with the current structure results in this, that we have separate parameter definitions, separate parameter names encoding this direction information. So we have this fixed ratio in unit flow, fixed ratio in out unit flow, etc., 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 which is cluttering up the database. We have essentially the same parameters over and over and over again for different direction combinations. And this is not really nice from a usability point of view. So this is the main issue that the changes are trying to solve. And here is the same figure from 2 slides ago, except I've grayed out all these parts because they are not subject to change at the moment. You might notice that the connections are kind of grayed out, even though if you've used SpineOpt, you might know that the connections kind of suffer from the same issue. We'll come back to that. But this is basically all the same boxes as previously. But this time I've highlighted the sort of changes to the structure. So there is no longer perhaps I should say that the commodity class has been renamed to grid. The old commodity class was not really used for much. It was mostly used to contain properties of grid physics, like if you wanted to define load flow, related coefficient parameters, they were all under the commodity. If you wanted to define gas grid pressure physics, they were all under the commodity. So we have currently proposed to rename it to grid, which doesn't have too much of an impact on the data structure itself. It's just the node commodity relationship will be named to node or renamed to node grid, but the unit commodity relationship will be gone because it wasn't really used for much. The major changes in terms of structure are with the units to try and get rid of this unnecessary duplication of parameters and entity classes. And this takes advantage of a new feature in SpineDB API that allows defining something called superclasses. Essentially what they are just groups of other classes. So if we look at the unit related classes here, we now have this unit flow. But this doesn't have dimensions in itself. This is a superclass. And then if we look at the next one, it's a node to unit, in parentheses unit flow, which means that, okay, this is basically the former unit from node. The dimensions have been flipped around and it's now a subclass of unit flow. Then there's unit to node, much like you already getting used to it in the old structure. It's also now a subclass of unit flow. And what the unit flow superclass now allows us to do is it allows us to redefine some of the classes we had to duplicate before. So instead of unit to node investment group, unit from node investment group, we can have unit flow investment group. And this one handles both directions because the direction is now embedded differently in the unit flow superclass. Similarly, we no longer have the unit flow, or sorry, the unit node relationship class that was causing issues before. I just realized I might be using the old terminology of relationship class, object class, as opposed to just a generic entity class. So the main difference, if I use that terminology, is that when I talk about object classes, they only have one dimension. If I talk about relationship classes, they have more than one dimension. I try to use the entity class because that's the proper term, but I'm stuck in my old ways. But yeah, the unit flow class now allows us to define ratios between two specific flows. And again, the direction is kind of embedded inside this unit flow superclass itself. And this basically allows us to avoid having to embed the direction information in the parameters, which I think I have here. So yeah, so this is basically a table showing the how the parameter mess changes with these changes. So in the old class, we had this unit node relationship, and we had a bunch of parameters, fixed ratio, in out unit flow with different combinations of the in and out directions. But now that we have unit flow, we can have just one parameter. The current proposed name is constraint equality flow ratio. We'll come back to why it's named that on the next slide. But the important part is that now, instead of 4 different permutations on the name of the same parameter, we only have one. This is also not a comprehensive list. There is a link you probably can't click. Hopefully you can, since I'm sharing the PowerPoint itself, but I can share the link or the slides hopefully later.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, click it, you mean? Okay, great. Yep. Where was I? Yeah. But another sort of advantage of doing this is that whereas with the old structure unit node, you could define parameters in direction combinations for flows that didn't exist. So if you had a unit that had an input flow and an output flow, you could accidentally define a ratio between 2 inputs for it. No one would alert you that You had accidentally did this. Spine Toolbox, you didn't do that. SpineOpt couldn't detect that. You could have that definition thinking it does something, but it doesn't. With this structure, you actually need to have the unit flow there to be able to create this relationship in the first place. So you can't accidentally, you shouldn't be able to accidentally create ratios over non-existent flows, which is an added bonus. Okay. Then there are a bunch of parameter renamings, which are sort of not really addressing the main issue I highlighted before, but they are for clarity purposes mostly. So in the previous slide, the constraint term was thrown around in the parameter a lot, partially because we want to have this alphabetical grouping of the parameter names. So basically, have the parameter names written such that when sorted alphabetically, similar parameters group together. What does this mean? For instance, for node, we used to have a bunch of old parameter names: state, coef, storage, form, ghost, is long-term storage, fixed node state, initial node state, blah, blah, blah. If you sort those alphabetically in Toolbox, they end up all over the place. The new parameter names kind of try to organize them, organize the different elements so that when you sort them alphabetically, all the storage related parameters, like in this case, end up close to each other. Minor convenience, but still nice to have. Makes browsing through the documentation and the databases a bit nicer. Another aspect of the parameter name changes is that some of them were unnecessarily long. For example, in the old structure, we might have like parameters for like connection availability factor, connection contingency. So there's a whole bunch of repetition for this connection, but we already know it's a connection parameter because the entity class is called connection. I believe this was a relic from some older versions where we had to avoid parameter names that were shared between multiple entity classes. Because as you can expect, there is also an availability factor for units. It's nicer for users to have it be called availability factor for both entity classes. Previously, we didn't do that. Now we can do that. So we're trying to do that so that you don't have to go looking up new parameter names every time you switch entity classes. You might find what you're looking for by using the same parameter name. But yeah, I think that wraps up the brief summary I had about the changes. Again, there's a ton of especially parameter renamings, the structural changes I showed earlier, but parameter renaming, there's a ton of. There is a up-to-date list that Nina generated based on the actual migration script. Was made by AI, so there might be some errors. We caught a bunch of them earlier today. But yeah, just so you know. As for the connections that I mentioned earlier, like I said, currently the connections use a similar structure to units. So there are the connection to node, connection from node, connection node relationships like units have. And these changes we haven't implemented to connections yet because we're having a discussion in the Mopo project whether we should simplify connections more thoroughly to sort of give them a bit of a clearer identity in modeling terms. Because at the moment, connections are basically units with less functionality from a purely modeling point of view. Technically, they have flow delays or flow delay parameters, which I think is the only thing connections have that units don't, if I remember correctly. But I might be, my information on that might be outdated, so don't quote me on that. But yes, so there is this discussion to sort of simplify connections, because most of the time this is what a connection looks like. We don't need a separate variable for what goes in from a node into a connection and then from the connection to another node. Most of the time connections are used for this kind of modeling where we technically need only one variable going from one node to directly another node. We still want to have the connection there as an index in the case we need to group, or if users want to group multiple links between, if there was a third node here, if there was a connection linking node 1 to node 2 and node 3, and then there was some sort of a constraint over both links, it is not clear to have the connection label there. But yeah, that is kind of something we're currently discussing, whether to do something like this or whether to just rework connections similar to what I showed previously with the units. And then to finish up, a very tentative timeline that I threw up. So over the spring and summer, we're currently working with some fixes into Spine interface that kind of need to happen to properly support the new structure. I'm not going to go into the technical details here, but there is some stuff that we need to do implementation-wise. So merging these changes to master would probably happen around summer, fall this year, hopefully. And just something I forgot to mention earlier, to not freak you people out, there are automatic migrations scripts for the current changes. So if you have a database in the old structure, there are functions that SpineOpt automatically migrates that data into a new structure. We have tested it wherever we can with what data we have, and it should work, but you never know with these things. Sometimes users are very creative, doing things that we don't expect them to. But hopefully it works. And then in the fall or in the late summer, maybe we might get somewhere with the connection updates and see if they could be merged into the SpineOpt proper before the end of the project at the end of this year. So yeah, that was basically all I had to say. So thank you for your attention. I hope this was helpful for you. And if you have any questions and or discussion, then please ask. I guess, Tars, people can ask questions, right?
Yes, they should be able to.
Okay, great.
Only if they want to present something or show something, then we need to intervene and give them special rights or something.
Right, yeah, makes sense.
So far, it seems we don't have too many questions, but maybe a bit expected because it's a bit of a niche topic.
It is, yes.
The recordings, we will see what we can do. We may be able to put them on the website, but yeah, we may have to do some editing or something, or make them smaller, or yeah. All right.
Yeah, that's actually something. I don't know, Tars, like, are the slides also somewhere public, or?
That's something that we can discuss. I think this one can be easily be put public, but then we'll just send it to me, and then I'll find some way to put it somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's already in the SharePoint, but.
Yeah, but okay, not everyone.
Yeah,
has
that's
access
not that. Yeah, that's internal. But I don't need to
okay,
send
but you
it
can
to
point me to. Yeah, you can point me to.
I can just send you the link.
folder. Yeah. Okay, that being said, so thank you for the presentation. That's for one. And then I'll open the floor to more general questions. So in that sense, it will be a user meeting. It's as useful as you want to make it. If you don't have any questions, then you can just say, okay, I'm heading out. It's no problem at all. If you do have questions, feel free to ask, whether it's, again, on the installation or whether it's on using Spine Toolbox or SpineOpt, or whether you have found some weird, creepy bug. We can try to do something about that. But before you leave, I want to express again, next time we will be talking about the Zenodo, so the data side, and we will have multiple presenters. So that will be a bit of a broader topic, a bit of more people. So yeah, that is also a bit of a bigger webinar, I think. So that's something to look forward to, I suppose. And I have the feeling that Antti wants to announce something as well.
Yeah, I was thinking that since we have the user meeting here, I could, if we have time, I could advertise some of the new features in Spine Toolbox.
Sure. How different is it from the last time? That's maybe something to mention. And because we had a webinar specific to features in Spine Toolbox.
Yeah, right. So I would just show like two new things that are upcoming in the next Spine Toolbox.
Please go ahead. Maybe do I have to make you a presenter?
Maybe I don't remember how the instructions were, how to give somebody and.
Probably I had to join via a specific link.
No, I think you should, if you go to the people or whatever it's called, I think there could be an option for the presenters to give me the right to share.
No, you're actually already under presenter, Antti.
I am, okay. Yeah, I got some magic link from Nina then. So let's try it out. Can you guys, you should be able to see my screen now, right?
Yes, very nice bird. Do you know which one it is?
I don't know. This is the background image changes automatically every now and then. So there is basically now two features in the queue for the next Spine Toolbox release. There might be more, of course, later, but we'll see what lands in the next release in the end. So one of the maybe a big visual change, as you can see, the toolbox looks here a bit different, and that's because we have implemented light and dark themes in Toolbox. So if you go to File and Settings in the General tab, which is open readily, there is the light and dark theme choices here. Changing the theme needs a restart, so you need to close Toolbox and reopen it again. Well, I'm not going to show the dark theme. I'm gonna leave it as a little surprise for you.
But maybe do show the colors, because people who want some color can still have some.
The colors, the only
color you toolbar can... icons, the first one.
Yeah, well, yeah, it gives
nice.
colors at least to these guys here. I didn't even know that setting exists, so there is dark
but
corners
I like
in
this
Toolbox.
version the best. Like the stylized light is nice, but I do like the colors for the icons.
Okay, I wonder how they look like in the dark mode, so maybe somebody will soon file an issue about the colors there. Yeah, there is other stuff you can change, like the background of the design view. I don't know why it's showing and just a circle now, but maybe I need to actually change this color to something else. Okay. There is options, but only the dark and light modes is something new. Another perhaps more useful feature is kind of a new way to build scenarios. So let's add some alternatives here. Usually how you make scenarios is by dragging and dropping them from the alternative tree here down to the scenario tree here, which is pretty cumbersome to say at least. The other option, of course, is to go to the scenario pivot view where you can just check these boxes. But now we have a new way of handling scenarios directly from the scenario tree or building scenarios, and that is by right-clicking the scenario name, and then there are two new options here. First of them is this add alternatives, where you can select, let's say that we want to have base and C here. So I'll go down here and then just press mouse button, and then I will get the selected alternatives in the scenario in the order in which I selected them from there. And if I want to add further alternatives, I can just go here and say that I want also D here. Now the other option, new option here, is duplicate with alternatives, and this you can use to build new scenario based on some another scenario. So I called this baseline for a reason. So let's say we want to build new scenarios on top of this one. So for that there is this duplicate with alternatives, and I want to create, let's say, two scenarios, one with baseline plus A and one with baseline plus B. And that gives me these new scenarios here. The first one, you see the name has this appended plus A, and the other one has this plus B. And if we list the alternatives, you see that A is now the highest ranking alternative, so it's overwriting the other ones, and in the second one we have the B here, plus the other alternatives from the baseline scenario, so these three guys.
So if you add to baseline both A and B, do you get A baseline plus A plus B, or do you get something else?
So if you go here, let's say A and B, you will get baseline plus A plus B, so exactly as you thought. It's that simple. So you will maybe end up with some 20 pluses here when you really start working with the scenarios. Of course, you can rename this to anything you want. And that's it. Those were the two little additions or features that maybe will end up in the next Spine Toolbox release. I hope at least the new ways to build scenarios will be much useful for users. That's it.
It's a little bit funky, but yeah.
Yeah, at least you don't need to drag and drop those alternatives
Yeah.
around anymore, because it is clunky. It was clunky. It's still you can still do it, of course. And you can drag and drop the alternatives around in the scenario tree to change the ranks.
Okay, nice. Good. With that intermezzo, we go back. We open the floor once more for additional questions, and that can go beyond the things that we've seen today. It can be very general, can be very specific. For those who still want to stay and ask those questions, and for those who don't, I can always say goodbye to them. And I hope to see you in the next webinar.